my current company is called Ansys, and I've been at Ansys about 3 years, and my previous company was called Cadence Design Systems, where I was working there for over 20 years. And so, I'm selling $100,000 million type sales of computer software for design.
So, well, we can maybe sort of talk about your commission structure offline, because I know that's always really big in sales. So, So Gary, tell us a little bit about your education, career, and your sort of journey, education, career journey.
Yeah. So as you said, I graduated from Cal Poly in 1979 in industrial technology. I went right to sales. That my dream was to go into sales and to be a sales manager. So I was able to get a job. You may not recall, but the personal computer was not yet invented when I graduated, and I wanted to get into technology sales, and there were not many jobs. I was super fortunate to sell computer plotters back in 1979 for a company called CalComp. My dream was met. I got promoted, and then I got promoted again. And by age 27, I was a regional sales manager, and I was insanely incompetent. And so that wound up ending not well. And so I went to a small company that's a Cadence Design System that today is about $3 billion. So I hit the jackpot. I joined a phenomenal company that would grow and grow and grow. I learned tons there, and it was the kind of the key fortunate move of my career. And then I wound up doing some finance work and some company consulting, and then back to, like I said, back to a big company called Ansys. So I've been really fortunate. I'm old now, but I've yet to get a job by submitting a resume. I've always managed to have a relationship, some sort of odd circumstance where I met someone on a vacation, or my dad's friend, or there's always a friend of a friend or something involved, and for really the 4 jobs I've had in my career. So anyhow.
Good. So Gary, so this is a class on 7 habits of highly effective people. I was really pleasantly surprised when I announced to our Industrial Technology Advisory Board that I was teaching this class, and I forget, maybe you came up to me on a break and said, "Hey, Eric, I'm a big believer, and I'm really glad you're doing this." So we connected up, and it's amazing the people that know about 7 habits. But so how do you get started in 7 habits?
So the book was somewhat popular 20 years ago or so, and so I got hooked on the book, and then I took a class with my wife on First Things First. But I was in big. I had the 7 habits notebook for planning the week, planning my life. I was in. And so it's probably been over 20 years, and there are tidbits from the 7 habits that I use every day.
Yeah. So how do you use the 7 habits in your job, or you said like every day, right?
There's certain things that have stayed with me. So, by the way, I'm sorry, I just have to make a comment, since you just came off the seek of WinWin.
Right.
So there was early in my career, there was this purchasing agent named Helen that would chew me up and just spit me out. I mean, she was so difficult, and I hated it. I actually took a 12-hour class on negotiating just for her. And so I'm going down my new strategy for negotiation, and it is not going particularly well, as it never did. And so I finally said, look, Helen, all I'm trying to do is find a win-win for both of us. And she says, let me tell you what I'm looking for. I want a deal where I win and you lose. So I'm like, okay, well, this didn't work. But I learned more later. I learned more later how to still make that happen, even with obnoxious customers. So
yeah. Well, yeah, and overcoming that, we talked about the, the different, win, lose, lose, win, these different sort of, potential scenarios. And I guess there are people out there that are kind of geared that way, and you gotta work with them too, right?
You do. But I think she was just trying to throw me off. So she was successful. She was successful. So, yeah. But I think the area that I use a couple of the principles all the time. I mean, one is first things first, just the idea that if you don't cement in place time to do the important but not urgent, you probably will never do it. And so that's certainly important. Well, in business, it's really important. Like if there's always a lot of urgency during the day, and if you want to really go after like a multi-year contract with a new customer, you just have to set aside time to do it. I do that pretty much first thing in the morning. That's the first thing I do, and I carve out some time. Relationship wise, right, you guys at some point will be out there, and your friends will be a little more scattered, and it really will be important to kind of think ahead of when you can get to lunch with a certain friend, or have a beer with another buddy on the weekend. They won't be next door. And kind of making social plans, it falls into that as well, where you kind of think ahead. It's not urgent, but super important. Right. So that's one. But the one I might want to talk a little more about tonight is seeking first to understand, then to be understood. And this kind of falls very directly to my career in sales. And so, what I found early in my career, I did really well at first with a client in terms of gathering information, but I was just pulling the trigger too soon to talk. I thought I understood enough, but I didn't really understand, right? And so I would talk, and I was fortunate to be around some mentors that I could observe, and it's like, man, they really hold off, where the customer is almost begging them to talk. They're just asking question upon question, they're reflecting back, and they're gaining such a greater understanding of the customer than I had. And I'm not just talking, I mean, I sell an insanely technical product, but and so you have to understand the application of the product, but more importantly, you have to understand like what's going on that has you there for an hour and a half. Like, what's wrong? What's the impact to the company financially, to you working weekends, whatever, right? And so anyhow, it's an important principle. So
well, like you make an interesting point about hanging in there and how hard it is to hold back from the talking piece. I really like that idea of they're almost begging you to talk by the time and maybe that's an indicator you've done it well, right? That you're really starting to understand.
Absolutely. So I mean, basically, we are all guilty of listening with an intent to reply. Right? We're not listening with an intent to understand. We're listening with an intent to reply. I mean, if like with my son, if I said, let me tell you what my favorite sports team is, he's just poised to find me make a mistake or say something stupid, right? He's ready, right? So God forbid we talk about politics here. It's we're pretty much ready to respond even before the person says the second sentence. And so this quite frankly, this is a discipline to move from what I would call selective listening, where you're listening until you have an interesting response, right? Or it's what you want to talk about, or you want to argue about, or whatever that might be. But in the sales world, the behavior is, I have a product that has 3 unique features, and I am going to ask questions until the customer says one of the 3 magic words. and when that customer says one of those things, they say the word reliability, I'm launching.
Yeah, you push the button, right?
I'm like a push button salesperson.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really bad. But I had looked up on this, and there's a book that was why customers don't want to meet your salespeople, and there's a survey that's the crux of it, and it's like 20% of like salespeople don't even listen; they just like start launching. They don't even care what you want. 40% are just selective. Yeah. Actually, more than 4. So now it's like, you got 2/3 of salespeople that aren't listening barely at all.
Yeah.
And so as I learned to be more patient, and as I learned to be a little, do some reflective listening, as you guys are going to learn about tonight, I just started getting just an enormous amount of information from the customer, both like factual as well as emotional, like where they were personally affected by a tape out that's a chip manufacturing step being late by 2 weeks, and how they had to work 14 straight days for 14 hours. And so I was able to get so much more rich information. But I would always be with technical people. I'd be with electrical engineers, and it became bad for me to like kick them under the table to shut up. And so I actually took the Covey Seek First to Understand. I made up my own class as a lunch topic, and trained the whole staff on, we're just going to seek to understand until it's appropriate to respond.
Right. So everybody on the team sort of had that same sort of approach and mentality, because you were doing that. Was just like in a team selling sort of.
Yeah, and it'd be very common. We'd be with a room full of people, and myself and some highly technical engineers with me from my company.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're pretty patient, but there's certain situations where customer just said those juicy things, and they just, please let me talk a bit. No, shut up, don't say anything. Yeah. There's a time, there'll be our turn is next.
Hey, Gary, I want to, speaking of our turn, I want to make sure the students know it's their turn to ask questions if they have any. So Gary, you also do quite a bit of speaking at Cal Poly in our sales class in industrial technology too, because you're certainly a master salesperson, and we try to pick your brains in multiple ways, in the curriculum. So
yeah,
you should be aware of
and
that too.
By the way, I believe the Seeking First to Understand is a lecture in the sales class still.
Yeah.
And so which is phenomenal. And so if you haven't had that class, it's a great class, and be prepared.
This is a topic I almost guarantee that you might hear it again, certainly in industrial technology, but as you go out in the real world, this is a core skill for so many jobs. I even know, so Gary's talking about from a sales standpoint, I know from lean problem solving approaches, really trying to understand when the operators are telling you about a problem, or the engineers or whatnot, if you can just shut up for a while, you know, the answer is there, you know, so.
Exactly.
Let's see. So let's see. So if you want to, if you could type if you got a question, type it in the chat would be a good way to do that. Or you can just sort of raise your hand and pop up. And we'll take that. Let's see. So it looks like Oliver came to my rescue there. So Oliver, why don't you go ahead and pop on and ask your question?
Yeah, hey Gary, I was just wondering, you said when you first learned about the 7 habits, you sort of stuck with the habit 3, put first things first a lot. I was just wondering if you've kept up with the weekly planning since then, or how you've used that weekly planning aspect of it.
Yeah, what does that look like for you, Gary?
Yeah, so it involves trying to look at least a week out, and just try to block off an hour here, an hour there, and just, you know, the analogy used in the class is really good, right? About sticking the rocks in your schedule, because there's a pounds of sand that are about to come in the coming days. So that I use. It was torment for my industrial technology son, but every week we had a family meeting and went through schedules and tried to set aside some time that was, you know, the key, not urgent but probably really important. You know, set aside some time. That might just be as simple as, you know, negotiating family dinner, you know, 3 nights a week or whatever that was, but we did weekly planning as part of that as well.
Very good. And thanks for that question, Oliver. Let's see, Nick, you've got a question.
Yeah, Gary, I'm curious how you apply win-win in like sales, and especially how it involves money, because it seems to be hard for both people to win when there's money involved.
Right. So that's just a phenomenal question. So one of the things that I've learned is that if the reason win-win is difficult is that often it's about one thing. And what I've learned personally and professionally is that it's never really about one thing. There's a lot of variables out there. There's a lot of opportunities to come up with a different kind of win-win. Part of that, by the way, is this seeking first to understand, right? If, like, for example, a business example is you're meeting with a customer, you're listening, you're understanding that they're a small business with cash flow issues. They need some help with a certain capability. They need a consultant or something. And you start listening, and the things you could do for the customer potentially grow and grow and grow. And so instead of, I have the one product that you want and you want to pay, you know, $50,000 for it, and I want you to pay $80,000, instead of like the one item, it's really a variety of items. It's like, look, I'm going to, because you're a small business, I have approval to delay payments. I'm going to give you staggered payments. I'm not, you know, this other product you say you need, you don't have anyone to run it. So I'm going to give you, you know, 8 hours of consulting, and you're going to bring an engineer in that can run that for your team. And I'm going to do, you know, I'm going to do all these things, and you're going to pay me $80,000, right? It's like, you can get to a win-win, but it's impossible to have a win-win if there's only one variable. So, yeah.
And
So
a lot of times we think that, you know, money is that sort of one variable, right? And so you got to let go of that a little bit. Interesting.
And by the way, what I've learned is that now that I'm a experienced salesperson that knows how to listen for things, that understands business and technical situations, like I have a much better chance of finding alternatives. Still, a lot of customers only want to talk about price, because that's kind of what they've been trained to do, you know, and you know, it's kind of the sale within the sale to say, look, can we have a different kind of negotiation? Because, you know, you have a $10 million business problem and we're arguing over $20,000. It's like, I'd really like to be more holistic about this. Now, personally, you do this all the time. And so, you know, it's like, tell you what, you know, I'm game to do this if you do this for me later on, or we switch next week, or, you know, the key is listening, and then trying to figure out all the additional variables you can include to make everyone happy.
Yeah, talking about, like, you know, understanding what all the factors are and what the wins are for, you know, yourself and the other person and all the other people in the room, really. So
yeah.
Hey, Gary, I would love to talk about this all night, but this seek first, understand, then be understood is kind of a longer kind of topic, and there's a lot of skill involved with it. So we're going to try to get these guys pointed in the right direction. But this was a great kickoff. Is there one piece of parting advice you want to give this new to 7 Habits crowd? That's
piece of parting advice, I guess. I can just speak from my own experience. Is it there's a lot of really phenomenal nuggets that are part of the 7 Habits, and so just figure out what rings true for you and stick with it.
Yeah, great advice.
Then you can come back and be a guest lecturer like me.
Yeah, I've already threatened them with that. Thank you, Gary, for reinforcing that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to gallery view, and what I'd like to do is if everybody can fire up your video, let's give Gary a nice little Zoom wave as a thank you. Gary, thanks for doing this, and we'll hope to see you more in sort of a non-COVID situation.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care, Gary.